All right, welcome back everyone. We're diving back into our GIC Solutions series. And we're not just here to check boxes and find answers. We're going to use these questions as a key to unlock some really big ideas in economics.
So how can just 10 multiple-choice questions tell us so much about how economists see the world? Well, that's exactly what we're about to find out. We're tackling questions 51 to 60 from the 2021 paper. But remember, it's not just about getting the right answer. It's all about digging into the why behind it.
First up, let's dive right into the heart of microeconomics. We're going to decode the logic behind the decisions that you, me, and big companies make every single day. Okay, question 51. Which of the following curves is called a rectangular hyperbola? This is a great one to start with. Now, the correct answer is D, the average fixed cost curve. But let's be real, the important part isn't just knowing the name, it's understanding why. What does this very specific shape actually tell us about costs?
All right, so take a look at this curve. It's showing us something really simple. As a company produces more stuff, that's what you see along the bottom, the fixed cost for each single item, that's the vertical axis, gets smaller and smaller. A perfect example is a factory's rent. Whether you make one widget or a million widgets, the rent is the same, right? So the more you make, the less that rent costs you per widget. The cost just gets spread thinner and thinner.
Now, that term rectangular hyperbola sounds super academic and intimidating, doesn't it? But the idea is actually, well, it's as simple as pizza. Seriously, think of your total fixed cost, like that factory rent, as the entire pizza. The more slices you cut, which is your output, the smaller each individual slice gets. That's your average fixed cost. But here's the key. The total amount of pizza never changes. It's always one whole pizza. And that constant total is the magic behind this special curve.
Okay, next up, question 52. We've got a classic demand curve here, and the question is all about the elasticity of demand at point A. This is really just a test of whether we know how to measure elasticity on a straight line. Since point A is clearly above the middle of the line, the answer is going to be D, which means demand is elastic or ED is greater than 1.
And you know what? There's a fantastic visual trick for this called the geometric method. You don't even need to do complex math. All you do is take the length of the line segment below your point and divide it by the length of the segment above it. So for our point A, you can just see that the lower part is way longer than the upper part. And anytime you divide a big number by a small number, you get something greater than 1. Boom! That tells you demand is elastic right there. It's a really neat shortcut.
All right, let's move on to question 55. A consumer will purchase more of good Y than good X only when... This one, I love this one. It gets right to the core of how economists model our decisions as rational consumers. The answer is B, and once you see the logic, you'll realize it's something you probably do without even thinking about it.
So it all boils down to one simple idea: getting the most bang for your buck, or as economists call it, utility per dollar. Look at this comparison. If the satisfaction you get for every dollar you spend on good Y is higher than what you get from good X, well, what are you going to do? You're going to buy more of good Y, of course, and you'll keep doing that, shifting your money over to Y until that bang for your buck is exactly the same for both. That's what we call consumer equilibrium. It's just common sense, really.
Okay, so we've looked at the logic of how people and firms make choices. But economics isn't just about theories, right? It's also about proof. So for our next section, let's get into the numbers. We're going to see how economists use statistics to find very real, very concrete answers to problems.
So question 53. At first glance, this just looks like a weather question about rainfall, but really, it's a classic stats problem in disguise. It might seem a little tricky, but the secret is just to work backward from the averages they give you. Let's break it down.
The logic is super straightforward. Step 1, we find the total amount of rain that fell over the first 6 days. Just multiply the days by the average. Step 2, we do the same thing for the full 7-day week with the new average. Now the only difference between those two totals is the rain that fell on Sunday. So for step 3, we just subtract the first number from the second, and that gives us our answer.
And what we find is, wow, a staggering 23.8 centimeters of rain fell on that one Sunday. That makes the answer option B. It's a perfect example of how knowing the average allows you to work backward and figure out a missing piece of the puzzle. All right, our next question brings up a term that can sound a bit scary: mean deviation. But honestly, don't let the name fool you. All it is a way to measure how spread out your data is. Think about it like this. If you're throwing darts, the mean deviation would be like measuring the average distance of all your darts from the bullseye.
It just tells you how consistent you are.
Okay, so here is the absolute key to answering question 54. When you calculate that average distance, you could measure it from the mean, the median, or the mode of your data. But, and this is a fundamental property of statistics, the mean deviation will always be at its minimum when you calculate it from the median. Why is that? Because the median is the true center of gravity for your dataset. It's the point that minimizes the absolute distance to all the other points. And that's why the answer here is B.
Okay, time to switch gears a bit. We've done theory, we've done numbers, now let's look at some history. These next few questions are less about calculation and more about knowing the key people, ideas, and policies that have literally shaped economies.
This slide actually bundles up 3 different questions for us, so let's run through them. First, question 57 asks, who wrote How to Pay for the War? That's a famous one. It was the one and only John Maynard Keynes during World War II. Then we have question 58. Where was Asia's first export processing zone? That was a huge deal, and it happened in Kandla, India, back in 1965. And finally, question 59, who wrote Planned Economy for India? This was a hugely influential book by the brilliant engineer and statesman M. Visvesvaraya. So 3 quick facts, 3 key pieces of economic history.
All right, for our final topic, we're zooming way out. We're going from individual decisions all the way to the global economy. We're talking about the big institutions that manage international economics. And for a question like this, getting the timeline right is absolutely everything.
So question 60 is all about putting these major organizations in the right order. Let's just walk through the timeline. It all kicks off right after World War II, with the IMF being established in 1945 to stabilize currencies. Just 2 years later, in 1947, we get GATT, the big agreement to lower trade barriers. Then we jump forward to 1966 for the creation of the Asian Development Bank, focused on regional growth. And finally, much more recently in 1995, the World Trade Organization, or WTO, was founded to replace GATT with a more powerful system. So the order is IMF, GATT, ADB, and then WTO. That makes option B our correct answer.
Okay, we've made it through all 10 questions. So, what's the big takeaway from all this? What have we really learned by breaking these down? Well, I think it's this. Behind every single one of these exam questions, there's a core economic principle that actually helps explain how the world works. The real point here isn't just circling the right letter. It's about grasping the powerful concept behind the question, whether that's rational choice or statistical analysis or the history of global trade. Those are the ideas that truly matter.
And I want you to remember, these are not just abstract ideas for an exam. Not at all. The next time you see a news story about gas prices shooting up, that's elasticity of demand in the real world. When you hear about a trade dispute between countries, that's the WTO in action. These principles are literally everywhere, shaping the headlines you read every day. Thanks so much for diving into them with me.